Hello and welcome to Get Started with Inline Manual. I'm Heather McNamee on the customer success team here, and just want to make sure you can hear me. So if you can't hear me, you can mention this in chat, and I will keep an eye on chat and we'll answer your questions at the end. And we will send you the recording, just so you know. So what can you do with Inline Manual? In this webinar, we're going to show you how you can create tools, tips, and tutorials, all step by step, and answer your questions or your users' questions in context on your site or your application. The nice thing is you can actually segment and filter which users are seeing your messages, and then you'll be able to look at how your content is performing with analytics. So it's sort of a whole package there. At Inline Manual, we're actually self-funded and bootstrapped, and we developed it originally to solve a problem a lot of software companies have. After we build an application or site for clients, we have to find a way to do some training and get them, self-sufficient. And creating that material, the screenshots, the screencasts, and all the printed manuals, we realized there probably could be a better way, and that's where Inline Manual came from. And let's look at how our customers are using Inline Manual. This is an example. This is TeamGate. This is their guided tour, and this is a really common welcome screen model where you can see, you want to introduce for the first-time user what the experience is going to be like. So they click the start and go through some steps. And they have this walkthrough highlighting functionality in the interface. Here we can see they're describing a main section of their application. And, of course, everyone who's creating software is trying to make it as intuitive as possible. But there's always a lot of terminology that users need to get familiar with. And sometimes a video just can't cut it because you want to guide people through and orientate people to where they need to be. Here's another example from another client. They're SalesSeek. And again, this is a totally different look. And in this case, they've chosen to embed a video. So sometimes you can show people things that you can't see in the UI. So we need to embed media, images, or video. And they can click through and see the welcome orientation. And again, here's another example, this time Freshdesk. And you see that variation in style because of the flexibility we have. They can use the style editor to create this type of look, or they can use their own custom CSS. So I like this here because it's a nice welcome showing, the people behind the software, and of course a skip tour button. It's always good to give people an out if they don't have time to do that. In their next couple of steps, here they are using a video. And the nice thing is, this is a good way to start with your first-time users, but it's also a great way to continue. So later on, if you want to use announcements, you still have that model. And they've also done a click-by-click walkthrough showing them how to do something. And the nice thing is they can learn how to use the interface and then find out where they can get more help and continue on. This is another example of, this is Crunchboards, and they're offering a tour. And sometimes people do want to skip the tour. You can see there's a small skip link in the lower left-hand corner. But the problem is, what happens when users skip the tour and then realize later that they want to get it back? So the nice thing is, if you look over to the right, you can see a widget. And this is where you can actually opt to list the topics. It's almost like a knowledge base, so that people can go and reference it later. You can search by title in this list. As well, you can make this respond to where they are in the application. So if they're at the administration section, it will list administrative topics. Or you can also say, oh, I'm creating new content. You can list a bunch of content at that path as well. So the context paths actually make this a lot easier. And as I mentioned, once you start that model of welcoming new users this way, you can continue this way. If you may have seen a message like this from me, where we can tell people, here's some announcement or some new feature or something like that. And so you can actually say, well, first-time users need one experience, and then our existing users, they need a different message. And that's what we're going to look at today. This is another just showing example of the widget here on the right with release notes. And I'd like to show you how to do that as well. So I'd like to hear your questions as we work through this. I'm curious if you're using Inline Manual to engage your users. That may be to guide users on a first-time experience, or announcing the features that you have, maybe segmenting to different types of users, such as people with different plans have access to different functionality, and they need different messages. So you can segment your users any way you like, but it just depends on what your needs are. You could also be using it for support, and this is great because we often, when you're releasing new software, something goes wrong, and people need help to find a workaround or get something done. Or sometimes they ask for features that already exist and they weren't aware of. You can actually create guides on the fly. Your support teams can actually be doing this as needed, and creating knowledge-based content right within the app, which is a nice way to support your users. And I think the best way to understand it is actually to open it up. If you haven't already started using your authoring tool, we're going to look at an example application now. So we're going to build a welcome message, and that welcome message is going to bring people through several steps, click by click. And when you open up the widget, you'll still be able to get that topic in the widget, and we'll link to it from an article. So let's see what that looks like. Here we are on our demo application, and in the lower right-hand corner here, you can see the widget. This shows up here by default. You can change the color of this. You can change the title that it says here, and you can basically customize this as you like. Let's look at that release notes list. Here we have an article. This is actually, you can put anything you like here in HTML, and then link to go on a tour. But as you can see, there's nothing linked there. So we're going to actually create the tour that goes there. Let's look at what these tours look like. Here we are in a welcome tour. It's greeting me. I'm logged in as John, so it says, hello, John. And this is a step template that has, you can customize what this looks like. And we click next to start the steps. And you'll notice I was actually redirected on the second step, so it doesn't matter where I launched that from. It will redirect me on this second step to make sure I'm in the right place. So that's one nice thing you can do on the tour. One thing about this step as well, I can't click around here and accidentally, change some configuration as I'm getting the tour. So we've got a backdrop here with a cover over it. And that's a nice way to, if you have to, control interaction. On the next step, in fact, I do want people to click, and in this case, I've got 4 different options here. So that's why you can actually select multiple elements at a time. And here we've got a final message just saying, great, you're all set. And always don't forget to have a last step. There's something satisfying when people have completed something. It's good to know. As well with analytics, it'll be very clear to you that people have finished a tour. So that's what a basic tour looks like. Now we're going to add one. As I said before, we have this release notes, and we're going to create a new feature tour similar to the one that you've seen already. So in order for us to get ready to start building this, there's a couple of things we're going to need. We're going to need to install the authoring tool. So if you haven't already installed the authoring tool, that is the very first thing you should do. You don't have to really do anything on your own site, in fact, to use the authoring tool. I mean, in theory, you could actually create tours for any website in the world, but they won't run until you have the player installed. So it's probably wondering if you have this authoring tool, and it is a Chrome extension. You may be wondering about the requirements for users. So in fact, the authoring tool, of course, is a Chrome extension. You will need Chrome to create the content. But for your browsers, for your users, they can use any browser they like. So the script gets installed on your site, and it works with any modern browser. So that's just to clarify really what the requirements are. And with that said, you'll be able to, if you install the authoring tool, you'll be able to build this on your own site right now or right after we finish this demo. So let's look. Here we are. I've installed the authoring tool in my browser, and I can see the link up there. When I click on that, it launches. And what you'll see when you first start is you may need to create a site if you haven't already. I have a staging site here, and that's the one I'm working on right now. So you can actually create multiple sites for your different uses. And in this case, we're working on the staging site so we can practice this on this new feature. So the first thing I'll do is create topic, choose walkthrough, and make the new feature tour. And I would like this to be hidden in the widget because I'm going to link to it from that release notes article. So we saw a list of the content in the widget, and this will actually hide it. As well, I will just say create topic. Great. Cool. So our very first step, we want to welcome back our existing users, I should say. And we'll choose a step template like this one here. And what you saw before is that you can actually just edit the text directly. Oh, sorry, you can edit the text directly here. I just typed in my name. Very funny. And instead of having a static message, what we're going to use is a token, in fact. So you can choose tokens based on the information that you're sending to Inline Manual. So in this case, I could use the name. And there we go. You can add any content you like in here. It's HTML, and you can use external CSS, as we'll see later, but you can also put in anything you like in this area. So that's the WYSIWYG editor. And now to get to the next step, we're going to use this next step button. All of this is customizable, what the text says and the color of the buttons. This is just what it looks like by default. In our next step, what we're going to do, similar to the tutorial you saw already, is we're going to redirect somebody. And what we'll do is take people over to this page. So the authoring tool comes back up, and you'll notice we've changed to a different location. And we will put in our message. Oh, yeah. So this is the new feature that we're talking about. And we're going to have the popover appear over the new feature, which is this, maybe. And that selection tool is selecting the element, and this will show you what element is actually highlighted. You can see there, which you can customize this, but what Inline Manual will do is select the most specific one that it can find. And the other thing we want to do within this step option is, sometimes you may want to do, is reposition it. For example, putting this over to the left or to the top, depending on where you want the popover to appear. So there you go. And the other thing you saw in the demo was the backdrop. So I turned on a backdrop to highlight, point out what we're actually looking at. And in this case, I will also use this cover so that we can restrict people from clicking on it. And this is where the Elements tool can be helpful. If I have something very specific, I can expand it to get an entire, it's like a parent element in that case. So let's go on to the next step then. We have to have some way to prompt onto what the next step is going to be. And in this case, there's no action for them to take. So we're going to have the trigger, in next button again. So they'll go on to the next step after that. And if we need them to click on something, we could ask them to click on this again. Here we go. And Now this is just a dummy application, but you can imagine, depends on what you need to do, but most cases you will be using click triggers. So once they click on this, it will go to the next step. So let's repeat that step where we turn the backdrop on. And in this case, we do not want the cover because we actually definitely want them to click on this. But I can also change the way it looks. Maybe I, for some reason, want to change to a different color. So there we go. So that's the third step. And then once they've completed that step, we'll go to final step and say, done, and then we'll have the end button. And this is the draft, I suppose, in a way. You can actually see what it looks like, and you can preview the entire topic to test it out. There we go. Good stuff. Oh, we'll click Save. So if I hide the authoring tool, all right, actually there's been a question about the language option, and I would, instead of saving this for later, I'll show you right now. The language is automatically set in the browser, so the visitor's browser. So if you are curious about multi-language, I will actually demonstrate that for you so you can see how that works. I'll demonstrate that after we finish this demo, in fact. So here we can see, right, I'm going to turn off the authoring tool and open up the widget, and sometimes when you create new content, of course, you have to refresh. You'll notice that the topic I just created is not available in the widget because I hid it from the widget. I want it to link from this button here. So, and we can also launch it, of course, for first-time users, or sorry, for returning users. That's what we'll do. So I will start the authoring tool or open the authoring tool again. If you need to move you'll notice over the top right here of the authoring tool, you can dock the authoring tool back and forth if you need to see something. And what we'll do is go back into the release notes, and here on this custom button, the custom button was added with this option here, button link. And I'll change a link to topic and choose this new feature tour and save. The nice thing now, I suppose, with this in this case is that I think I've saved it yet. Is that we can control when it appears. So it may take a few minutes, but what will happen is after it refreshes, is that after we click on this button here, it will launch the tour. When we come back, it'll refresh. So cool. So let's see what we've just built. We created a walkthrough which responds to user actions on buttons or triggers like the element we highlighted. We used a backdrop as well. And then we configured the widget which lists all the content. So we hid something from the widget in that case. And finally, we linked to the walkthrough from a specific article. And now we're going to do a little more work on the widget and the content that's listed in there. And we'll actually configure a few things. We're going to change the design, and we're also going to see how to create a multi-language option. So I'm going to show you how to change the default text and also add and arrange the topics. So just to show you on the demo site what I'm talking about, we're going to look at how you can add topics to here or change the order of them. And then this widget title, it says Inline Manual. We're going to change that so it says something else. And we're going to change the color of it as well. So here we are in our account, and you can see the staging site that I'm on. And we could think of our sites in Inline Manual as containers for topics. And in this case, we have a bag, I suppose in a way, there's like a backlog here of topics I can add, such as this Christmas message, and I can make it visible. And I can also change the order of things as well. And I can, by hiding them, the nice thing about the reason you might hide things is so that you can use segmentation to launch them for users later. So let's look at changing the language, and we do that in Settings, Player Language, and add a localization. So we're actually going to create an English language localization because we're going to change what this says. Let's say need help. And in this case, you could also change from end. You could just say finish is maybe an alternative, or done, like that. So you can actually customize the language of the interface itself. And save. So you could have Spanish here, you could have Japanese, whatever language you need to add will be listed here, and then it will choose what's appropriate or have the fallback if there is no localization. Because we're talking about localization just very quickly, I wanted to show you what it might look like if we had multiple languages. So I'll just add watch me not speak any Spanish at all. So we're going to choose Spanish. No idea what this is. There we go. I actually studied French. I could have used that. So here we have 2 languages. And actually, I'll come back to the authoring tool in a minute, maybe finish the customizations. But I'll show you how you can use those 2 languages. So just while we're in settings, I want to show you also player appearance. This is where we would actually change how the application looks. So you can use this tool to select and change the color of the buttons, or you can add in your custom CSS. So that's kind of where the flexibility comes in. And I also, that's basically it. If you want to make a direct link to topics as well, just so you know, you would get your topic ID and simply make a path with your site name and equals IM topic with a capital T equals your topic ID. And I'll show you where you can get the topic IDs here. Okay, there's your topic ID right there. So before I go into creating the automation, I'll just go back into the authoring tool to explain multiple languages. So if we do have a Christmas message, for example, and you want to launch multiple languages for people, what you would do is choose your language options. And it looks like it hasn't refreshed yet. Sorry, it'll just take a second. Maybe it's a lag. But you'd add your alternative. Oh, right, sorry. Yeah, I'll just add a translation. Oh, is it Feliz? No, here we go. All right, because I've already configured. Okay. So here's my English language, and this is the Spanish language. And basically what you want to do is toggle between your English and Spanish translation when you're working in the editor. And you could probably copy and paste, in fact, probably the easiest thing. There we go. Go back to my Spanish. Oops, excuse me. There we go. And something like that for our Spanish. So that would be how you create the multiple languages. And then once you have those available and you've configured the multiple languages on your site, then the content will be delivered properly. So I'll send you after this webinar as well, I'll send you a link of a good resource on the help site about using multiple languages and how you do that and how the workflow works, especially for keeping that information up to date and translation, of course. So we'll look at optimization now. This is probably one of the most important things about using Inline Manual. You'll have to actually enable analytics and people tracking on your site. So if you are just starting out, you'll see this Enable Analytics button. And then once you do that, you can go to people tracking and it explains how to do it. So if you aren't a developer, you'll get your developers to choose what information you want to send to Inline Manual and use an Inline Manual. And that's basically how you configure it. So like the installation script is a one line piece of code. This is a few more lines. So we're going to show you now how to do segmentation to get the right messages to the right people, and auto launch the content based on these rules of who you want to show it to. And we're going to look at monitoring that progress. So back over in our site management here, we'll look at the segmentation. Well, actually, I'll show you people tracking. In fact, there's not much here. I have only one user coming into our site, and this is our fella, John. But this will actually populate with your actual users, and you can browse and search with from your user accounts. And you can see here I know his roles. You can also get things like the plan, etc., whatever information you decide to share. So we'll look at the segment now. These are the segments that are available to you by default. This is new users, and this is everyone but new users. So we're going to have a new feature tour show up for everyone but new users because we already have a welcome message for new users. And these are people who are signed up greater than a week ago. If you wanted to add rules to that, you can see the different types of options that will be available, again, depending on what information you're sending. So after we've looked at our segments, we'll go over to automation. The auto launcher is very easy to set up. In fact, we're going to select a topic, which is going to be the new feature tour. And we're going to show that to everyone but new users. And I suppose in some ways, new users are sort of bedazzled by everything about your application, but your existing users will want to know what's different. And sometimes you'll get more support requests for your new releases from your existing users. Things have changed for them. And so that's why we're offering this new feature tour to our other users. And we'll have it just play one time in this case. And click save. Okay. And once that's set up, you can pause that if you want to restart that same campaign again. And that's basically how the automation works. So as it is now, when existing users come back, they'll be met with that greeting. New users will also still be able to get that tour as well. So that's basically how you create these automated tours and auto launchers. Oops. So here we are. This is what it will look like after you've been working on your site for a while. You'll start to see some drop-off funnels. And here what we can see is after step 5, people are checking out. Maybe we don't need the last 2 steps. Maybe we need to move the final step to step 5, give people a nice sense of having finished something. And it depends on how you want to interpret the analytics, but this is how you can optimize the content that you're creating. And this is an example of what it might look like if you had a number of users in your account, and you can see how you might be able to segment users based on this information. If they haven't completed or even launched any of the steps on a particular tour, you could even create a segment to send a different message out to those users and make sure that they've seen that offer. For example, it could be to convert them to a plan or extend maybe their use of the product. This is what it looks like when you can see your users, the type of information you might have based on their use of your application. So what would you like to build? I guess I would like to hear now what you've seen me do so far is there's no coding required, but you can extend it, or you can even edit the HTML yourself. You can update content very quickly and create these topics on the fly. And we also have a robust version control, and there's more information in our Get Started guide about that if you're curious. And I wanted to check now if you have any questions. So let me just see. All right. It looks like there were no new questions, but what we saw asked in the registration was a common question, obviously, is a general introduction to using the product, and I think we've covered all the basics there. Pop-ups when people log into the site, that was the welcome screen we created, and using the auto launcher. And you'd like to see how it works for creating campaigns, different flows for different types of users. And again, this would be using the auto launcher to segment and make sure different types could be either by role or by plan, and you could show them different content. And then linking users directly to tutorials. So that is, all right, so can we conditionally skip some steps? Yes, we can. So in the case that, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's open up the authoring tool. And imagine that we have a new feature tour like this one. And it could be that if this feature, or sorry, this element doesn't exist, you may not be able to do that action. So you want to be able to skip to the next button, or sorry, skip to the next step or something like that. That would actually be done over here in callbacks. So I'm having trouble remembering all the steps. I will actually send you, after this email, I'm going to send you a link to the help section that covers this, because I think there's an op and there's a value, and once I have it in front of me, I can do it. But just so you know, this is where you'll actually get this done. You'll create a callback, and when the step is activated, you can have it check if an element is available. It's something like, I think it's element, and the value will equal this particular, I'm just going to inspect this so you can actually see. It will be like this, if this FA chevron up, it depends on whatever your element is. If that doesn't exist, then it will go to the next step. So that's what I'll basically send to you. I hope that's answered your question there. Cool. All right, good. That sounds like it is the question you had. And so I'm going to send that to you in the email, and it will explain it a lot better than I have just done. So I thank you very much for coming today. You can always contact us if you have any questions. Over in the help section, there's a lot of articles, obviously, covering some of the things we saw today, and maybe a little more depth. And when you're using the authoring tool, if you do see any links here, they'll bring you right to the help section for that feature. So thank you very much, and we'll see you online.